I'm working at Deutsche Bank as a project manager in the derivatives clearing as a work, and am fond of astronomy since ever, and had physics as a focus topic in my A levels, and was relatively good at that. Well, yeah, and then I also do astronomy, astrophotography, and as a hobby I started making my own telescopes, and also designing telescopes to some extent, at least. Not brand new designs, but optimizing existing ones. And okay, so I've taken some notes, some pages off, so that I know what I speak about this session. So the first question I wanted to ask during the session for myself and for you is, why should someone make a telescope in the first place? I mean, let's go back in time to the 1970s or so. At that point, it was difficult to buy a telescope, especially for amateurs. Yeah, because there were in the end only Celestron out there. There were a US company which was expensive, to buy telescopes there. They built Jonathan. This is Jonathan, by the way. Well, okay. So they were quite expensive. They were difficult to get. They were only SCTs, so long focal length, relatively well corrected though. And you had no choice but either to take a small refractor, like a 2-inch or a 3-inch refractor, or SCT, so Smith's Cassegrain telescope, which has again its own features, downsides and upsides. So nowadays it's a lot easier, Then in the 80s, Meade came around, and then in the late 1980s, Zinta was founded in China, and they first made eyepieces, and they started making small telescopes. They 4.5 inches Newtonians, and then nowadays you can get, for at least in Germany, for 500 euros you can get a 10-inch of f4 or f5. And if you then say, okay, you pay 150 for a focuser, you pay 50 for the viewfinder, you pay another 100 for the secondary mirror, and so on and so forth. You end up with, you essentially get the main mirror not for free, but it's not that expensive anymore, And then you calculate it back and you say, okay, grinding my own 10-inch is not really worth it, because I pay 100 euros for the glass, and I can essentially, then I have to add to buy a lot of stuff, and I end up with the same price as the Skywatcher 10-inch, Dobson. So for saving money, amateur telescope making nowadays is more difficult. If you want to save money, you have to go for a 12-inch or more. On a 14 to 20-inch, you certainly save a lot of money, because companies really take a lot of money for these kind of optics. The other reason why you might want to make a telescope is, I mean, if you have more time than cash, then certainly, especially for the larger optics, it's an option to save money. The second reason why you might want to make a telescope is you want to have a special design. You have a, for example, I made a small telescope, and I will show it to you later, which I used quite heavily, and it's in the end, it's currently my favorite telescope, which I use for when I travel almost every time. It fits in the hand luggage. It's relatively a nice telescope, performs well, and it's you can't buy things like this easily. You can buy similar stuff, but in the end, it's always more bulky and doesn't fit into hand luggage, for example, and so on. So making small travel telescopes, or generally travel telescopes in any size, there it's usually interesting to make it yourself. And traveling with a telescope nowadays, especially for people in Bangalore, Frankfurt, it's necessary, yeah, to get good skies. Other designs are if you want to build a bino telescope, for example, yeah, so a binocular telescope with large aperture. Yeah. You need to have two very similar mirrors with very same focal length and things like this, or lenses, yeah. And there it might be interesting to make it yourself. And the next thing is if you have want to have very fast optics, yeah, if you want to make a very fast Newtonian for photography, it may be worth to make it yourself because fast mirrors are usually very expensive. And then there are possibly other special purpose telescopes. Let's say you want to make a large aperture planetary long focal length Cassegrain. That was F20 or something, where you don't need extra optics for a Jupiter photography, lucky imaging. You can't buy these kind of things at the shop. Yeah, it's just not out there. So saving money is certainly not an option for small telescopes. Yeah, if you pay 200 euros or 120,000 rupees, or 200,000 rupees for a 6-inch or so, you certainly not get close to it when you run your mirror yourself. Yeah. Okay, so this said, you can also build a telescope just for building a telescope, just as a hobby itself. Yeah, never use it, or just use it once, try it, see whether it works, whether it really works. Yeah, that's for enthusiasts who also are interested in telescope design and optical design. I've made a Stevig Powell telescope and did some modification to it. I had been in discussion with Mr. Stevig, who had actually invented this design, and I made a 6-inch. And the 6-inch is a tilted telescope, so it's a mirror telescope without obstruction. It's for the optician among you, yeah, it's an anastigmatic aplanar. It's has no coma and no astigmatism and no chromatism, so it's achromatic as well, hypochromatic. And it is a relatively long focal length, very bulky thing. Yeah, it's 2 meters long. It has 50 centimeters high and 30 to 25 centimeters wide, and this is really large for a 6-inch. Yeah. But it's a very special telescope, very nice design from an optic perspective, and it was quite an experience to make it, I need to say. Yeah. So you can't really use it on a daily basis because it's just, you can't carry it even, yeah, in a car. It's 2 meters long. It doesn't fit in. Yeah. So these are the reasons why I'm going to make a telescope. Yeah. Now the question is, what kind of telescope should I go for if I want to start making telescopes? Yeah. And there's a very simple logic. Yeah. I would go for a light bucket, so Dobson with large aperture. If you want to start with a easier task, yeah, then I would go for a small travel Dobson, tabletop Dobson. That's what I built, and I can show it to you, and it performs really nicely, and it's a great tool. Yeah, it's really for daily use on a travel. You can put it on the balcony in your holiday apartment, whatever. Yeah, when you travel to your parents, maybe living at a more remote site. Yeah, you just take it with you, put a table outside, and then observe. Yeah. So light buckets, large Dobsons, 12-inch and larger. Yeah, 14-inch, 16-inch, 20-inch, even further, can be made by amateurs in a quality which is better than what you usually can buy. You can get good quality mirrors from Orion UK or Zambuto, yeah, the god of godfather of mirror making. Yeah. But then you spend a fortune on the mirror. So a good, best quality Orion UK mirror in Germany costs around 8,000 euros, which is I think 70,000 rupees for the mirror alone. And India tends to have large customs on telescope equipment. whatsoever. I don't really get it, but that's the case. And so good quality mirrors are worth to be made by amateurs. If you start, you should say your goal is to make a perfect mirror. Yeah, and it's achievable. It's not like it's something you can't think of. Yeah, it's achievable. Most mirrors made by amateurs who finish it, who really want to make a good mirror, the mirror is better than anything you can buy. So what you can also do, as I mentioned, yeah, really large, fast photo machines, if you have a good mount. Yeah. These kind of telescopes are also quite expensive, but there you also need to spend a lot on the other items besides the optics. Yeah. I will not go too much into detail for the mechanics. Yeah. But certainly focuser is something which can be quite expensive for a telescope if you make it yourself, because focuses, you can make simple focuses yourself, but complex ones, good ones, are expensive and they simply cost. Yeah. Okay. So when you want to make when you're really advanced, yeah, and you made more than one mirror already, or like 3 or 4, you can go for a design which I've made some years ago, where I wanted to have a Dahl-Kirkham is a Cassegrain type of telescope. So it's a 2-mirror telescope. Newtonian is a 1-mirror telescope. The secondary is essentially just to put the beam somewhere where you can access it. Yeah. The beam would be otherwise in the middle of the telescope. You can put a camera there. You don't need a secondary mirror if you just put a camera in the middle of the telescope. Yeah, but has no optical purpose beside of bending the beam out of the light path of the main to the light to the main mirror. The Cassegrain has a secondary mirror which has a purpose. Yeah, it has function. Yeah, it has a it's usually extending the focal length and correcting a lot of aberrations which are introduced by the main mirror. And Dahl-Kirkham has a nice telescope because it's relatively easy to achieve. Yeah, for a 2-mirror telescope, it has a prolonged elliptical main mirror, which has relatively fast focal length, but it's still relatively easy to make. And it has a spherical convex secondary mirror, which is spherical mirrors are usually anyway easy to make, because you don't need to figure anything at the end. And in the process of making telescopes, or mirrors, which I will show you and explain you, a spherical mirror is the first intermediate result. Anyway, okay, so what I designed is a Dahl-Kirkham where you can make the Dahl-Kirkham, and then you need a corrector to optimize it for example, for photography, to have a perfect field. And the great thing about this design was that the corrector, you don't need to buy it, and you don't even need to make the lenses for it, but you can buy the lenses, which is a lot cheaper than buying a corrector or buying or making it a lot easier to make it. Yeah. You need to buy 3 lenses. They are available from many companies. You can buy them multi-coated already, yeah, which is something coating lenses for amateurs is essentially not possible and not achievable, and you can't get it. Yeah, you can't go somewhere and ask, coat my lens. Yeah, at least I haven't found a company. So that would be a design for the most ambitious amateur telescope maker. There are designs out there that they're really great, really interesting. Yeah, so these are the ones for the really experimental people. Yeah, which are well-tilted mirrors. Yeah, there's a Herring reflector type of telescope which has like 2 mirrors, and the beam enters here, goes back to the other mirror, goes back to the first mirror, goes back to the second mirror, and exits and on the top again. So it's 2 mirror, 4 reflections, very compact, non-obstruction telescope with good quality. But I don't know anyone besides the one who invented it who have ever built this kind of telescope. It's difficult to design, difficult to understand how it should work. Yeah, and very tight tolerances on the distances of the mirrors. The second thing is, as I mentioned, is David Powell. Yeah, it's simply beautiful, beautiful design. And then any kind of refractor, any kind of lens telescope is something which is really experimental work for someone who wants to make a telescope. It is so much work, so much effort, and the aperture is so small that you, in the end, yeah, it can achieve. And it's so cheap to buy in the meantime that it's not worth at any time to make a refractor yourself. It's simply not worth the effort. You have to at least grind and polish 4 surfaces. I made a refractor myself, which was mainly for the sake of making a refractor. Yeah, it took me a lot of work. It took me a lot of money to finish it, and it ended up as a 3-point-something inch achromat, yeah, which is something you can buy for nothing in any shop. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really nice telescope from a pure optical, from looking at it and knowing that you made it yourself and so on. But it was an experience in the end, and that's what's left over. A small telescope which is not really used, and a lot of experience. And there are very special, very difficult to make telescopes like Riccardi, Honda's, Busak designs, extremely fast medial telescopes where you have lenses and mirrors combined to make f3 telescopes, very fast photographical telescopes, which have enormously tight tolerances, where you need to think about, am I able to measure to a 10th or 100th of a millimeter on a distance of 50 or 60 or 70 centimeters? Yeah, because you have a large distance you have to bridge. Yeah, and this distance has to be very, 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 very precise. Yeah, and otherwise you end up with bad quality. Yeah. So this said, you end up with a small Newtonian, yeah, with a small Dobson, or with a large one, with a small travel Dobson, or with a large Dobson that you can really which you take out only with a car. Yeah, but then you go to a remote site and you really look at very faint objects. Yes. Okay. So making optics. Jean Texereau, the book I think most of the people who have ever looked at telescope making is the kind of the Bible, or the most basic document which was written on telescope making in the recent past. Yeah. Telescope making, amateur telescope making, is as ageless as astronomy, because when Galileo looked in his first telescope, he had made his telescope himself. Yeah, because he can buy anything. Yeah, it was a 1.5 inch, very long focal length, very bad quality. No one would even bother to look through such a telescope today. Yeah, but he discovered the Jupiter's moons and stuff, so was worth to make it. Similar to Kepler, yeah, and Herschel and all these guys didn't make telescopes for a living. Yeah, they made it to observe. And different to Fraunhofer, for example. Yeah, he made telescopes as a profession. Yeah, and he made glasswork as a profession. He was not an observer. He did telescope design. Fraunhofer, Achromat is the most famous one. Yeah, but telescope making is old. It's a really ancient topic, and it's interesting as well. Yeah, so I have a book from this one. I can show you. It's a telescope from Bell, and I have a nice picture in there, which is this one. The modern telescope. And if you look at it, it is a modern telescope. Yeah, it has a main mirror. It's a Newtonian. It has a secondary mirror. It has a focuser. It has something to attach the viewfinder. It has tube rings. It looks very much like a modern telescope. Modern telescopes would probably have a bit less, so they would be have a lower f ratio. Yeah, this one is a relatively long f ratio. But in the end, it's a modern telescope. Now, this book is from 1920, so it's 100 years old. So in the end, this design, however, was already 250 years old when this book was printed. So you have a 350-year-old design and instructions from this book or Texel, which is a bit more refined, yeah, which are 100 or 70 years old, and nothing changed. Yeah, it's the same methods you use as these guys did to make telescopes nowadays. Yeah, there's nothing substantially changed to it. Yeah, there are some better materials that you can use nowadays. Yeah, you don't have to use green bottle glass for a main mirror, like they do on the Mount Washington Observatory. Yeah, so it's the observatory. Yeah, at that time, and they use green bottle glass because there was nothing else to be bought in this amount. You now can use borosilicate glass, yeah, the Pyrex in the end, or how you call it, which is better in many regards. Yeah, it's easier to polish. It's polished faster, especially as ceramic oxide. It is harder. It has less thermal expansion than normal window glass. So, but in the end, it's the same as at that time. So you decided to make a small telescope. Yeah, you have you should first overcome all possible obstacles before you start, which means you should be fully aware of the whole design of your telescope, from the mechanical parts and the optical parts, mount, and everything. Yeah, it's not worth to start grinding a mirror if you have no clue how to mount it later, how to make the secondary mirror, what to use as a tube, and these kind of things. So ideally, you have everything laying around before you start, because otherwise you end up with a half-finished mirror, which you may not know how to polish. You end up with a mirror that's wonderfully nice, yeah, but you have no chance to, you don't know how to get a secondary mirror, or you're wondering how to install the focuser on your tube, all of these kind of things, yeah. You don't know how to install the tube on the mount. You should go through all the items, mechanical and optical, before you start. You should probably not build the whole mechanics for the tube, yeah, because you may end up with slightly different focal lengths and you have to adjust it. But plan it completely. Otherwise, you end up with a half-done project. Nothing is worse than having a great mirror laying around not being used. It's really poor, really sad. Okay, so what do you need to start? You need a table. You don't need a blank. You need a table. That's the most important thing. You need a table which is sturdy, which is robust, where you can grind on. Yeah, so it's probably not the living room table. Yeah, which may, because grinding is done wet. Yeah, so it's dirty business. A barrel, yeah, a wooden barrel with a plate on it is quite good. You can fill the barrel with sand ideally, or water, whatever. Yeah, so to make it heavy, and then you can start your grinding. Grinding is hard work, especially rough grinding at the beginning. So grinding the mirror means you have, I don't have mirror blanks because it's a bit bulky, but I have lens blanks. So the first thing you start when you grind a mirror with your blank is beveling the edges. So you take a grinding stone and you make a bevel 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters at the edge, which is important because otherwise these kind of things happen. You see it here, the chip, the small chip. It's just a very small chip here, and it extended like half a centimeter into the blank, and that's when you have it on a mirror. It is not as bad as it sounds, yeah, because this quarter of a square centimeter will not break your telescope, yeah. You will lose hardly any light, and if you paint it black with a permanent marker once it comes back from coating, no one will ever realize, yeah. But it doesn't look nice. Yeah? So bevel your edges, and if you have one chip, doesn't matter much. If you have two, well, not nice, yeah. But if you have them all around, yeah, then you simply lose surface, yeah. So once you bevel your edges, you need to start grinding, and grinding is done with one item, one tool, yeah, at the bottom, and the mirror you want to grind at the top. The tool can be made of either it's a piece of glass as well, which is the easiest thing. Yeah, it doesn't need to be then Pyrex or so. their window glass is perfectly fine. It just needs to be thick enough. Or you can make one from concrete covered with tiles, yeah, or something like this. So it needs to be ideally, especially if you want to make a small mirror, yeah, 5-inch, 10-inch, yeah, it needs to be the same size, ideally. And then you put the other mirror on top, and then what you do is you put grid in between. I have grid here. It's 180 grid. I can show you. It's like it's carbon. Let me show you there. Silicium carbide. Yeah, silicon carbon. I don't know how it's called in English.
Carborundum silicon carbide, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's very hard. It's brittle, but it's very hard. And it's loose, and you pour some water on your mirror, and you put this silicon carbide on it, and then you start grinding. Grinding is done by pushing the upper mirror above on the tool. And at the beginning, you start with some overlap because you want to make this one. You want to remove material here in the center, and on the tool you want to remove the material on the edges. So you grind like this, yeah. And that's why you need a round table, small round table. You walk around a bit, and then move your mirror clockwise, and then you do the same, and then 5 times, and then walk around, and this one turns, and that's why at the end everything comes rotary symmetric. If you don't have a table which is perfectly round, you can do it over the edge. So you go on one side of the edge, and then you walk quarter of a turn, yeah, or a bit more, and then you turn the tool counterclockwise a bit, turn your mirror clockwise a bit, and then you start on the left side again, walk around, turn, and so on. Yeah. So the further you get with your mirror, you'd start with 80 grit. So with very coarse material. Yeah. And you always have it wet because dust is really dangerous. There are approved lung diseases from people that worked in optical companies, let's say centuries ago, when it wasn't known. Yeah, it was a century ago. So you grind. At the beginning, you start with an overlap and long strokes. Yeah, and the more you advance, the shorter your stroke gets, and the more centric you are. Now, you can see here, as a lens blank here, so it has already a curve in there. You can see it, yeah. If you're grinding your mirror, you will get the center will go deeper and deeper, and there is this Zagita is called here. There's a formula, relatively easy formula. It's r product divided by 2r or so, yeah. So radius of the mirror divided by the radius of the curvature of you want. How you can calculate how deep you need to go to achieve your radius of curvature, and focal length is half the radius of curvature, so your focal length at the end. For this purpose, you will need some kind of spherometer, is called. It's a device which you can put on here, and then measure how deep it is in the middle. So you can use a dial gauge or a capillary for it with a bar, yeah, and then puts the capillary down, which is good enough, I would say, for mirrors. To give you an idea, for a 10-inch f4, it's 3 to 4 millimeters the curvature you need to achieve. So it's relatively small, but still a lot of glass to remove. Yeah, so it's hard work to remove this amount of glass. So you measure your how deep you are in rough grinding. I would say you should stop rough grinding about 1 millimeter before you achieve your target depth. Yeah. And then you go to a finer grit. So you start with 80, then you go to 180, let's say 320, and so on. And then you usually go to other materials for grinding, which is called microgrit, which is an aluminum oxide, special one for optical industry. And then you go to 15 mu or 25 mu, 15 mu, 5 mu, 3 mu if you like. and then you start polishing. Fine grinding is done the same way as rough grinding. So you push it over the mirror, but you use 1/3 stroke. So this would be half, this would be 1/3, yeah. So each side you go 1/3 over the edge, yeah, and then turning both tools yourself and the mirror, of course, yeah. And it goes finer and finer and finer as the surface. But even with the 3 micrometers grid, yeah, it's still not blank. It is it's very, very smooth surface. You will at the end also change tool and a mirror blank every once in a while, so that you get really a very, very, very nice curve. And then once you reach your target focal length somewhat, and the surface is really smooth, yeah, you don't have any coarse
pits and scratches, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you can always, when you start grinding from 80 to 180, you can see that there are some very large pits in the mirror from the 80 grid, yeah, and especially at the edge, it goes slowly away, and you can take a laser pointer and shine from the side to the mirror, and then you see the pitches glowing. And if you use if you if you look at it closely, yeah, then you can see there are still larger pitches from the previous grid left. Yeah? And you should always grind so that nothing from the previous grid is left, because if you have a pit from a 80 grid left and you didn't get it away with 180, you will never get it away later. Not with 300 of 20 or not with 25 mu microgrid. You have no chance. And this pit will stay there until even when you are polishing. And when you start polishing and you see pits on the mirror, and you know, okay, I have to go back all the way to 180 grid or to 320 grid for starting fine grinding, and you have already polished like 3 hours, that is really painful. So always be sure that you not have any pits left from the previous grid. It can take several hours, yeah, grinding for each type of grid, yeah. So you have, just assume you've always taken care that your bevel is still there. You have to re-bevel every once in a while. So you have a wonderfully made fine grid grinded mirror, which is really smooth, no pits left, and you start making your polishing. Yeah, polishing in modern industry, in modern telescope industry, is not done this way. They are really industry changed, but fine optics, which we want to do, hasn't changed, and their machine polishing is done with pads, which are polyurethane pads, yeah, plastic pads in the end, as where they use ceroxide, and then these pads and special tools, and then they polish at high speed, and you polish very fast, but you get a very rough surface. Yeah, you see these pads are not perfectly uniform, yeah, and you can see the scratch. They create an uneven surface. What we want to have is a perfect surface. So we use pitch, which was used in the optical industries for years and centuries, and is still used if you do manual polishing, and especially fine optics. Pitch is a natural material, yeah, which is made from pine trees in the end. You can buy it at different grades depending on when they melt, which then depends on your surrounding. Yeah, if you're grinding winter, summer, air condition, no air condition, and the pitch is cast. You melt the pitch and it's cast on the tool. Your tool has taken a convex shape. Yeah, the mirror is exactly concave, and the tool is a matching convex shape, and you put some tape around it, and then you cast the pitch on the tool, and then you cover your mirror with a soap, so with dishwasher soap, yeah, and then you press your mirror on the tool, and then the pitch takes the form of the mirror, and you can pull the mirror off, and then you need to carve some how you call it, yeah, you need to carve out some lines, yeah, like a rectangular shape, so that you get some square pieces of pitch, and then you have these channels in between, yeah. That's important for the water, because you always work wet. You also work wet when you polish, yeah. And the slurry with the ceram oxide, which we nowadays use for polishing, and the and it needs to flow between this pitch squares, yeah. And then polishing works exactly the same way as you do grinding, yeah. So you have your pitch tool, yeah, and you have your mirror, and then you put this the slurry on the ceram oxide slurry on the tool, and then you press it for some time. Yeah, so you put the mirror on it and some weight, and you wait for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then you start polishing. Yeah, so normal strokes, 1/3 stroke, center, turn, polish, and some, let's say, 8 hours later, you have a relatively smooth, nice, polished mirror. Yeah. You need to then use a laser again to see whether you have any pits left. Yeah? You need to polish it completely out. Any pit you have left, especially if you have, I mean, one pit wouldn't make a difference, but you wouldn't have one pit left. You would many pits left, and especially at the edge. Yeah? And these would scatter light when you are using telescope later. And scattered light reduces contrast. And you have already contrast reducing secondary mirror in the light path, so it would reduce contrast even further. And you will spend a lot of time with making your telescope. And the worst thing you can do is then not making it really, really good, because then yeah, it's not worth the effort. It's material costs as well. Yes, you can assume that in Germany at least you pay like 100 euros for a 10-inch, and 4 times as much for a 70,000 rupees, yeah, for a 10-inch, and 4 times as much for a 20-inch blank alone. Yeah. So and then you spend dozens, if not several dozens of hours of work in it, and you want to get a perfect mirror out. Once you're finished with polishing, you can even start testing your mirror before you finish polishing. Yeah, you can certainly identify the exact focal length beforehand. Yeah, if you start polishing, you will already get some kind of reflection image at the center, at the radius, if you use a point light source like a white LED or so. You can see you have a white LED and you have a piece of paper and you move towards the mirror, and at some point you see a perfect image of the white LED on this piece of paper. And then you can measure the distance to the mirror, and then you know the radius of curvature, which is twice as much as the focal length. Because the mirror reflects from point light source, the mirror reflects the beam back to the center of curvature. Now you have a perfect, ideally perfectly polished, perfectly spherical mirror, which is great for some purposes, but not for a telescope. Yeah. For a Newton telescope, you need to have a parabolic mirror, which goes deeper down and then goes like this, so, and not so. It's more or less, if you look at it as a you bend it down, yeah, the spherical one. So the parabolic goes like this. Yeah. The center of the mirror doesn't matter much, so you don't need to focus a lot on the center of the mirror. First thing, it's a very small surface anyway. Second thing is it's obstructed by the secondary mirror. So usually you can ignore the center 10 or 20% of the mirror at all. You don't have to care much. The 70% zone That is the most important thing, because that's where, if you have the mirror, yeah, center to edge, center doesn't care, then you go, and there's 70% zone. That is where you have to do most figuring. Yeah, that need to be raised in comparison to the center. So you need to make the edge, this piece a bit higher, and the edges need to go a bit down, yeah, and the center needs to go a bit down, and these pieces need to be highest in comparison to the sphere. So this is done by figuring the mirror, parabolizing, yeah, which can be, depending on the focal length and f ratio you want to do, can be ignored. Yeah, if you want to do a 5-inch or 6-inch f12, yeah, you don't really need to figure a lot. You can just not do it, yeah, and you will still have a useful telescope. And for a 10-inch f4, or even faster or even larger, it can take weeks to figure it. It's not rocket science, yeah. And so you use a stroke which goes like zigzag, so it goes, and then you go larger in the middle, and you go back small again. So you work from one side to the other with a mirror, and smaller, larger, smaller, yeah, smaller, and then larger, and then smaller again. That automatically creates a figure in the mirror, which is a parabola. So I have no notes anymore. I didn't come that far yesterday. When you have figured your mirror, you need to test it. You need to try and see whether it's actually figured enough. So whether you are at a parabola, whether you figure too much, with a hyperbola, or whether you have not figured enough and you are at an ellipse. There are various methods to test mirrors. Most of you probably know Ronchi, which is okay. Yeah, it's okay if you figure a mirror which is f5 or longer. It is or a relatively small one. Yeah, it is not enough if you want to do f4 or faster. It's simply not sensitive enough. You would test Ronchi against star, so you would have to need your final or a provisorical tube assembly in a secondary and an eyepiece, or at least a focuser, to do your Ronchi testing against the star. Or you can do normal star testing. Yeah, there's some that was used a long time since there were not really a lot of better tools out there. Yeah, so this book also contains images of how you can do star testing and what flaws you can see in the. So that would be really bad. What flaws you can see in a telescope. Star testing is a topic for itself. I think I never used star testing because it takes a lot of experience to identify the exact issue of the telescope in star testing. Key idea is to go to a bright star, which you can see without a coated mirror, without a coating. So it's bright enough to, with one or 10% reflection, sorry, well enough to see the star, even if it's defocused, and then you defocus it inside the focus, outside the focus, and then you verify what the difference is. And then if you are very experienced, have done tons of star testing, you exactly know where your mirror is wrong. A lot better method, really a lot better, is Foucault. And Foucault is kind of the gold standard testing for amateurs, because it is extremely precise, is extremely robust, which means you can measure issues on your mirror surface to hundreds of a lambda. So extremely precise. You can really verify your mirror to an extent which is way beyond your requirement. And the second thing is, it's not easy to make mistakes. When the Hubble telescope was made and they spoiled the main mirror, yeah, they used an interferometric null. And interferometric tests are very, very sensitive as Foucault. But null tests are extremely sensitive to mistakes with the setup. So a null test is in the end, you have a light source, point light source. You put it at the center of the curvature, and you get a point back, which is perfectly fine for a spherical mirror. There is already a null test. But if you want to test a parabolic mirror, you put another lens in there, or a lens in there, which compensates the spherical error of the parabola for the measurement in the center of curvature. If you measure against the star, then you don't measure in the center of curvature, but you measure at a focal point where the parabolic telescope was made for. Yeah? But in a null test, you need to have this null lens because you measure at the center of curvature. And what they did with Hubble was they misplaced this lens because there was some paint on a screw which was missing. Yeah. So they had screwed the screw in, screwed it out, and then paint dropped off. And when they screwed the screw back in, the thickness of the paint was missing, which was an issue for a telescope which has 20 meters focal length or something. Yeah? You can imagine how thick the issue, or how tolerance needs to be for focal length which already has only a meter. A telescope which only has a meter focal length. So, with a good amateur telescope maker, if they would have invited a good amateur telescope maker with this Foucault tester to make it to verify the main mirror of Hubble, the Hubble telescope issue or disaster would have never happened. Foucault is really a very powerful tool. I can't give you a Foucault testing device now. You should really look in the internet, and there are good examples how to build one, how to use it, how it works. It's not really worth to describe how it works on a call. It's simply, I would need to draw you give you a drawing. Yeah. The second way of testing mirrors, which is very interesting, is an interferometer. That sounds like very expensive, and the professional ones, the LIGO ones, or so, they are, and especially the reference surfaces you need to buy for it. And that's mainly because they are not common path interferometers, but they have different paths. They have time and green interferometers, so you have a beam that's split to the side to a reference surface, and the other one goes down to the mirror, reflected back. The other one is reflected back. Both beams are then going to the beam splitter and are interfering, they're creating an interferential, and then they are going to a sensor, and then you can see this line image that you usually know. Yeah. There are designs for amateurs. I can show you one that I've built myself. It's this one. This one is a so-called common path interferometer. That is very simple. So you have a laser here which is missing. Yeah? The laser beam goes out to this beam splitter, and then the beam is going, half of the beam is going through this lens, and it's widened to the size of the mirror. A bit larger, of course. Yeah, no issues with the lens edges and stuff in they have the even illumination of the whole mirror. Yeah. And the other piece of the beam is reflected down here and reflected back there by this mirror. And that also goes to the mirror as a single small point. Now, the single small point is going back to the mirror, to this lens, widened and going in the beam splitter and going out here. And this white light cone that goes out is concentrated back into a spot that goes into this mirror and also goes to the beam splitter over here. And then these two beams interfere. And since they are taking the same path, and they're taking the same path through the beam splitters and through the lens, the quality of the lens and the quality of the beam splitter don't matter much, because they are in the end canceling out the wavefront defects from the mirror and from the beam splitter and from the lens are cancelled out against each other. And that's why the quality of these devices have to be a lot less good than you would need for a normal interferometer, and that makes it a lot less expensive. Yeah, though you still need to get the beam splitter, good mirror. They should still have good quality, but like they don't need 100 of a lambda. A tenth of a lambda would be sufficient. Yes, so that's a bath interferometer, and the good thing about this is there is software out there called OpenFringe, where you can then import your interferogram. You need to do some markings on the interferogram. You need to enter the details of your telescope or of your main mirror, and then it gives you all the parameters you want to know. Yeah, you get the spherical aberration, or how much it's the conic constant. Yeah, how close you are to a parabola, whether it has any other issues, whether you have zones in there, whether you have other local issues in the mirror, and it gives you this play ratio that's in the end yet what you want to know. Yeah, whether you are at 75, whether you are at 95 or 99. Yeah, you should go beyond 95 always. Yeah, there's no use to make a mirror worse than that. Yes, that's how you can make and measure telescopes.
Nicholas, there are some questions in the chat window. So one of them is like, so will there be any human errors when we make these mirrors by hand?
The major one is to drop it. Yeah, just kidding. No, so the good thing is coming to a sphere. The main human error on making a mirror and coming to a sphere would be to be impatient. So as long as you say you think you're done with your grid for that size, yeah, you say just half an hour more. Yeah, that would always be smart. Yeah, then if you should always, when you change your grid, look at the bevel of the edges so that you avoid creating cracks. Yeah. You should wash your hands beforehand. Obviously, ideally you have like what they wear in the restaurants or in the kitchens. Yeah, like something to cover your head, because dust is always a danger. Yeah, you can always have some dust on the mirror, and then you put your tool on them, you push it, and you see, yeah, and you say, oh, cuck, yeah, oh shit, yeah, and then you look at it and you see a large scratch. The good thing about scratches is they don't matter. They really don't matter. So the amount of light that a scratch would scatter is so small in comparison to the overall size of the mirror. And if you are saying, okay, you're scared about this small scratch scattering light, yeah, then take a permanent pen and mark it, yeah, black it out. Then you would not see anything. Then you're just losing this amount of surface. Yeah. And if you lose on a mirror which has hundreds of square centimeters surface, yeah. If you lose out a quarter of a square centimeter, so what? Yeah, it's nothing. Scratches, avoid them if possible. Yeah. Wash your hands. Especially don't contaminate grid. Yeah. If you use a tool. If you want to, for example, fill your grid from your supplies, your grid supplies, you may have boxes where you have the finest grid and the coarsest grid in, and the finest grid you would mix with water, yeah, directly. So the microgrids I usually have in a bottle with water. Go, when you work with them, go from the finest one to the coarsest. Don't start with 80 and end up with 3 mu, yeah, because then it's extremely likely to contaminate those finer ones with larger ones. If you start with a 3 mu in filling it up, yeah, if you can contaminate the larger grids with the finer grids as much as you like. It never causes any issues. So there are some tricks working with a fine grid first if you have to if you have to move them in your cupboard, yeah, start with the finest one, end with the largest one. These kind of things. Otherwise, what can happen is, especially in fine grinding, that your mirror gets dry, and then your mirror sticks to the tool. And it's sometimes extremely difficult to get them off because they stick together like nothing. There are the easiest way and the safest way, what I found so far, is you take a pot of water. So you need to have a pot where the mirror fits in. Yeah, with a 20-inch may be difficult, but with a 6-inch should be possible. You put some spoons or something at the bottom, so that you have some distance between the bottom of the pot and your mirror. You put the mirror and the tool in there. You pour water on it, and then you start boiling it. And normally you can cook them off. You can cook the mirror of the tool, and you put the spoons and stuff in there, because if the tool would be sitting on the bottom of the pot, yeah, then it can happen that there's steam building under the tool, and then the tool would go up and down, and then it may crack. Yeah. So putting something at the bottom of the pot, putting the tool and the mirror on there, and then boiling it off. That always worked for me. I had it a few times. I made 8 mirrors, yeah, and it can always happen that things are the air is dry. Yeah, it wouldn't probably happen in Bangalore in summer, but in winter it may happen. Yeah, because the air is dry, and then your slurry dries out. Yeah, you have always a bottle of water, a sprayer. Yeah, the way you can spray your mirror for the grinding. But in my dry out, you might have just thought, okay, this one turn, yeah, and it sticks. It's easy to solve. So if you make a smaller mirror, it shouldn't be an issue. I would say making the optics, making the main mirror on a Newtonian is really no rocket science. If you keep on turning the mirror and so on, it shouldn't be an issue. There might be material, so it depends on what quality your glass has. Yeah, that there are some. If you get a good mirror blank, if you can buy a Pyrex blank, which was intended for telescopes, you will never experience any issues. If you buy what I did, for example, I bought a large glass table plate. Yeah, glass table plate, like 90 millimeter thick. And I got someone with a water cutting machine cutting mirror blanks out of it. And there it makes sense to verify whether there are any tensions, where there is any inner tension in the glass. And that is easy to make. Yeah? You take a computer screen which emits a polarized light by design. Yeah, you don't have to polarize it; it's polarized already. You put it completely white, and then you hold your mirror in front of it, or your blank. And if it starts to be very colorful and you see a lot of rainbow lines going through the mirror, then you have an issue. Then I would not even bother starting with a blank. If you see hardly anything like this or nothing at all, then you can safely use that piece of glass for making mirrors. Yeah. But these kind of things, I would strongly suggest, if someone really wants to now start making a mirror, yeah, that he gets into the there are more detailed instructions than this session can offer, how to make mirrors. Yeah, but it's possible. Yeah, it's not really difficult. Okay, other questions? Let me quickly have a look.
Nicholas, I had one question. I have not put it in the chat, but I'll just ask you. So for the Foucault test, do you visually do the inspection, or do you take a photograph and then see it on a screen and then do the inspection?
Okay, so for Foucault, I personally recommend to, I mean, nowadays you attaching the cell phone, yeah, to the Foucault tester would probably be the easiest way. And that's what I did on my last Foucault test. I'm not done Foucault for some time now, because I built my buzz interferometer, and it is quicker to do. If you have a bad interferometer, you make one picture and then put it into the software, and then it gives you the result. Yeah, for core you would need to have a counter mask for parabolizing, and that's again something I can explain. Yeah, but for core is a null test for a spherical mirror. In the moment you want to measure a parabolic mirror, you have to put zones on the mirror which you test, where you test the focal length of it separately. And that can be done. There is apparently software around where you can automate it to some extent. Yeah, we say, okay, you take images of 5 millimeters apart, yeah, and then you put these images into a software and tells you and it gives the details, and then the software tells you how the mirror is figured. There's also software around which is originally be used for a biological and medical analysis of stuff. Yeah, where we have tools where you can say you put a line through the image, and it gives you the brightness curve of this line. Yeah, where you can see the maxima and you can measure. It's all in the tool. Yeah, I don't know how it's called. It's done by some biological medical department university, but it's free and you can download it. It's used for petri dishes, yeah, where you can, for example, automatically count the number of cultures on this petri dish and these kind of things. But it also has a feature of measuring gradients and these kind of stuff. So you can use tools to improve the quality of your testing. And I would say you don't need it. A normal, very simple knife edge testing device is sufficient for the start, especially if you don't make a very fast mirror. And for a 6-inch, for a slow 6-inch, you probably need 3 zones on a counter mask. So center and then 70% in the edge. And then you can see a lot in the Foucault tester already without a mask even, I would say. But for that purpose, yeah, if you want to do a 6-inch f8 for Dobson or something, or something faster, if normal knife edge would be sufficient, and then do counter mask, simple one. There are software around where you can you enter the parameters of your mirror, you get PDF, you print PDF, you cut it out with a knife, yeah, and then you put it on the mirror. Very simple. So yeah, you don't need to have a camera, but it's useful. Okay, other questions? Let me quickly have a look. Okay, human error. Okay, what are the reasons to avoid that you have to start all over again? The main reason is to be not patient enough to finish each of the grids and grinding steps. If you find out the main reason. Yeah, if you find out at polishing the mirror that you have large pits in the edges, then you have to start at the grid that you think these pits are from, or the one you use after. So if you find 180 grid pits in your mirror on fine grinding, then you have to start with 320 again, and that is probably 15 hours of work that you have then to do again, or 20, depending on the size of the mirror, or even more. The second major mistake you can have is astigmatism. So you don't have a perfectly spherical mirror, and that mainly happens with large blanks. That's why I've not mentioned it too much so far. So if you want to make large mirrors, you have to certainly should grind the backside of the mirror, so the opposite side of which you want to grind afterwards, totally flat against some plate. And then you need to turn the mirror as often as possible on the surface where it's sitting on, because large mirrors you polish, you grind with the mirror on the bottom and a sub-diameter tool, a smaller tool, because otherwise you have to move a 20-inch mirror may weigh 30 kilos, yeah, and moving a 30-kilo mirror on a tool is simply not possible. So you would put the mirror on the bottom, you would have a sub-diameter tool on top, but you would then need to turn the mirror on the surface of where it's lying on very, very often in order to avoid astigmatism. And it's really bad. Astigmatism is not easily detected either in Barr's interferometry, which introduces some astigmatism as part of the measurement principle, as well as at Foucault. So in Foucault, you would need to turn the mirror and measure it often, yeah, and you probably don't take this effort too often. So avoiding astigmatism on large mirrors by turning the mirror and grinding the backside flat is important. Otherwise, you would have to start over again or can throw it away. Avoiding pits is important, and you should be careful to have a good spherical shape before you start figuring, because what can happen is it's called falling edge. You have a mirror which is great, and then at the edge it's falling down because during polishing the pitch at the edges were a bit larger than the mirror, so you should always cut the pitch to a slightly smaller size of the mirror, and then it goes over the edge, and then when you polish it, you polish off the edge of the mirror, which would mean, to correct it, you have to polish the whole mirror except for the edge to the same level, which is obviously, if you just polish 3 millimeters of the edge off, yeah, it's a relatively small surface. If you have to polish all the rest of the mirror to the same level, it can take you hours and hours and hours and hours. So you should always take care for the edge. And whenever you see that there is the slightest hint that the edge is going down, look at your tool, cut the edges of the tool, and make it smaller. Reduce the length of your stroke, because that can render your mirror really useless. If you have a falling edge which extends very large into the mirror, then you can more or less have to put a tape around the mirror, and then you have, instead of a 10-inch, you have a 9-inch, and for the same effort as a 10-inch, and it's not nice. So falling edges, astigmatism, and pits. These are the main things that I'm aware of that can happen, beside of dropping the mirror. Yeah. So handling the mirror with care at all times. If you dropped it once, it's gone. You don't have to drop it twice. Yeah, so that is the next item. So what else questions do we have? Okay, so refractors.
Nikolas, I have a question on grinding side of it.
Yeah.
See, when there is a pit of a last grade near the center, you can avoid, because you anyway have a obstruction of a sector, right?
Yeah, but the point is usually in almost all cases where I ground a mirror, the center is always the place where you grind deeper than the edge, especially if you have the mirror on top and not the tool on top. So the likelihood that you have a pit in the center but no pit at the edge is very unlikely.
So that is right. So in my case, it was neither in the edge, neither in the middle. It was actually between the center, like 70%. Yeah. And it got me a lot of trouble in getting that pit out. Lots of rework and all. But see, the problem is, if you go to theoretical ways, there are lots of different strokes which you have to follow, right? Like a mirror on top, in case when you're hogging out, right? So and you do half center stroke, like you have a half hanging sort of a thing, which you do, right? And then you follow different stroke, like a double stroke or a quarter hanging stroke. Now, in my case, I followed some of the people. Everybody has their own thought process of hogging down, right? Is there any universal rule which we should follow after moving on from 80 grade?
Okay, So
So what happened is I was grinding and somebody told me to do a quarter stroke without hang, center to center. And then I was confused. So I asked this other one person. So he said, don't do that. Use a double stroke because you are in the center. The spot is in between the center and the edge. So it is better to do a double stroke. So there's no written documentation on how this thing should work.
okay, so I remember there was some website, a Stellafano somewhere, where you had kind of an overview of what, or was it in this book? Let me quickly have a look. So there is an idea of which kind of stroke has which kind of result. Yeah. So there are. I remember somewhere was a list of how you do it. I think in Texaro even. So the idea, I think you have to consider basic principles. The basic principle is that the 1/3 stroke over the center is the most neutral one you can have.
Okay.
Yeah, or 1/4 to 1/3 stroke. So a 1/4 to 1/3 stroke over the center would usually not affect your curvature a lot. So that is, if you just want to get the overall shape preserved, that's the one you want to use. After 80 grit, when you're finished with 80 grit, usually, from my opinion, yeah, from my experience, you usually have the issue that on the mirror you have a very steep center and a high edge, and on the tool you have a low edge and a flat center. That's because you're starting grinding with an overlap at the beginning and long strokes.
True.
So my recommendation would be that to start that when you're finished with 80 grit, or when you are about to finish with 80 grit, when you say, okay, you're coming, you have at least 50 or 60% of your sagitta done, yeah, of the depth of your mirror, that you then move from a more aggressive way of carving the mirror out to start trying to get it into the spherical shape. So you would move from a overlapping long stroke to a more neutral one over time. Yeah, you would always go a bit shorter and a bit more centered, and you feel it. Yeah, it's the mirror. Grinding a mirror is a good thing with hand because the mirror responds to you what you do. Yeah, you feel it in your hand, if you push it to a certain extent, whether then it's difficult to come over this point and then push it further. And at the end of 80 grit, it should go relatively smooth, and it would be loud and it would be cracky, and you feel how that's still coarse, yeah. But it should when you move it on a 1/3 stroke, there should not be a point where you say, okay, here's something still not really in good shape. And that should over 300, 200, 180 and 320 should improve even further. And then there's one test that you certainly need to do when you go to 320, which is a pencil test. So what you do is you clean your mirror, which you have to do it quite often anyway, and then you make a square lines on the mirror. So like a net.
Yeah.
And then you take your next grid, you take a 320 grid, and you just, without a lot of pressure, push the mirror over the surface. You turn it a bit, push it over 3 or 4 times, and then you take it off again, and then you have a look on where did these lines were grinded off. And the most important thing is the outer 1.5 centimeters, because if already during fine grinding this is not attacked by this grinding, yeah, it will not be by polishing, and then you will always have a fallen edge. And a fallen edge is the one thing that you really can hardly, that costs you so much surface on the mirror, more than any you have and any chips you can have. And it's so difficult to remove with polishing only. You can polish 20 hours to remove a falling edge with no success. But you can from 25 mu or from 320 left over, you will have no chance. So when you're fine grinding a mirror, there's a key point is always check whether your edge is fine. And the best cure I found for a falling edge is tool on top, long strokes. And it doesn't matter much whether you overlap. You should probably do some slight W just to avoid zones, which a slight W does. And tool on top, remove with longer strokes at the beginning, going shorter, removes the falling edge. That's the most important thing. Tool on top is the most important thing. And then stroke, verify with a pencil test every half an hour whether your new approach has the result you want to have, and then modify your stroke accordingly.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Nicholas. I think we are running out of time, but we can extend for some time, no problem. But if you have something to show,
yeah, exactly. I wanted to show you my telescope, the one that I've made some time ago, and that I use a lot, which is this one. And I can go a bit further away so you can see. This is what I meant with making small telescopes. This is essentially a 5-inch. f3.45, so it's very, very fast. That's why it's so small, why it's so compact. And it's a Dobson, so it has a plate where you can turn and you can, well, you need to unscrew this lock, yeah, then you can put it up and down and turn it, and then it doesn't have a viewfinder at the moment. I usually attach a very small green laser to it. And this telescope weighs nothing. And I could even make it lighter. Yeah? I have massive plywood here and so on. It fits into any hand luggage in the airplane or in any bag I carry around. And it's a 5-inch. Yeah, it's not small. And I can tell you a story. I was in Portugal for vacation in spring, 2 or 3 years ago, and I did a Messier marathon for myself. And I observed 80 Messiers on one night with this telescope from a not far from perfect place. So it was relatively small effort to make, relatively cheap, because you can see the focuser is not a focuser. Essentially it is a flange, yeah, which I made myself, and it is a normal 1/4 eyepiece holder with a T2 adapter, and you do rough focusing by just pulling out the eyepiece a bit in and out. And then you can do fine focusing by just turning it a bit, which is good enough for visual observing. It's not for high magnification anyway, because it's a f3.5. Yeah, you wouldn't use these kind of things for planets. But it's great for deep sky, and you have this the mirror holder here. Of course, it's you can collimate it. You have the collimation screw at the bottom for the mirror. Yeah, and here is this piece. You can put a cardboard for if you are on a place where you have stray light. Yeah. This telescope I use a lot, and I take it with me every holiday. And it's small, cheap, easy to make. The secondary mirror was, I think, 75 euros or 60 euros or something, which was the most expensive piece. The main mirror was leftover tool that I had that I reworked, yeah, to a mirror. That was what I meant. If you want to make a special purpose small telescope, you can't buy this kind of Dobsons. This not in this size. Yeah, they are either smaller or larger. and they are always more bulky. Yeah, so I recommend to make telescopes. Yeah, but always think of what you want to achieve, and plan your telescope from beginning to end, so that you really know what you want to achieve and that you get there. Yeah, there's nothing, as I mentioned, it's nothing worse but starting a mirror, bending it because you're facing obstacles that you could have known beforehand. Yeah, or having a mirror made, finished, wonderfully tested. Yeah, Strele 98, and then you struggle making the mechanics. Yeah, that's would be a pity. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks a lot, Nicholas. Do you have your refractor telescope? Is it possible to
Okay,
show?
one sec. Takes a minute.
Yeah.
Nicholas is coming back. What's the difference between a reflector and a refractor telescope? What difference
Hi.
does it make?
Basically, a reflector telescope has a mirror. So it has a concave mirror. And then a refractor telescope just has lenses. So like the one used by Galileo that had lenses, so that's a refractor. The one which was constructed by Newton, which is called the Newtonian telescope, that's a reflector, which uses a concave mirror instead of lenses.
So does it does it mean that one is better than the other, or both has the same output?
So basically, the small refractors are easy to buy, and cheaper to buy and easy to make. But large refractors are not easy to make. So as the telescope goes larger and larger, I think a reflector is a more practical one. Apart from that, refractors and reflectors have their own advantages and disadvantages. So like a reflector usually, like if you I think Nicholas is back, so probably we can continue later.
Okay, so as I mentioned, you should not try to make reflectors, because reflectors are making them is a lot of work. Buying them is so easy. So this is a reflector I actually made myself just for the sake of argument. Yeah. So just as a proof of concept that I can make one. So this is the lens. You can see the two lenses, and they have made a lens cell as well, which is push-pull screw lens holder, which you can adjust, and anodized them. I also made the focuser myself. Yeah. So it's a normal focuser, which you can pull out and in with a Zahnrad, the gear. Yeah, and that took me ages to make. Honestly, it was an enormous effort. It was. I even had more issues because I used glass, which I wasn't fully documented, and one glass turned out, the flint turned out to be a different one than I thought. I had to rework a lot of surfaces, and it came out at 1.2 meter focal length, I think, in the end. And it's nice. It works. Yeah, it's performing well for a 3-inch, but it's a 3-inch, and it's not something you can put in your living room, and people look at it. But for observing, it's simply nothing you would like to use a lot, because it's bulky. It's relatively heavy. The mount needs to be stable. You can essentially only use it for planets, and their 1.25 meter or 1.2 meter focal length isn't, and 3-inch opening isn't really great as well. Another thing is lenses. You have to be less precise, because then refracting surfaces need to be not as precise as reflecting surfaces. But there are other downsides. So, for example, flint is extremely difficult to polish. Yeah, it really takes ages to polish, even the small lens. Yeah, if you know how quick a borosilicate, so a Purex blank polishes out with ceruxit, yeah, it's just painful. Yeah, you polish 8 hours and you think, okay, I've polished a 10-inch mirror in that time. Yeah, and you still see pitches and small scratches back in the flint glass. Yeah, I don't recommend it. Yeah, you can do it if you want to have the experience. Otherwise, go for a mirror. Everything else is pain. I think I have one single topic left, which is flats, because I told you about main mirrors and Newtonians, but the Newtonian has a flat mirror, so this diagonal mirror, and you think probably, well, if I can make a main mirror that large and that precise, yeah, why shouldn't I be able to make a secondary? Yeah? So for that, you need to consider secondary is essentially also a round spherical mirror with an infinite long focal length. And as I mentioned, yeah, you automatically make a mirror spherical if you move the by grinding it. By grinding the surface, you will automatically make the other ones convex and the other one concave. Yeah, so you can change it a lot, but you will always have one bit more concave and the other one a bit more convex. So when you want to make flat mirrors, you usually use 3 blanks, and you polish them A on B, B on A on B, B on C, C on A, and then you circle them around, and by having one on the bottom, the other one on top, then this one on bottom, the next on top, and then this one on bottom, the next on top, you can end up with very long focal length, even after fine grinding and then after polishing. But it is a lot of work, and you need to achieve focal length of several 100 kilometers ideally. So it needs to be really, really flat. And the reason is because you put it in the beam this way, you create a maximum astigmatism by any curvature in the secondary mirror. And that's also how you would test it. If you make a main mirror and you intend to make a secondary, you would leave your main mirror spherical. You test it as Foucault, whether it's perfectly spherical, and that's something you can easily do. For testing a mirror to be spherical, Foucault has a sensitivity of 100 lambda. It's a null test for spherical mirrors, essentially. And then what you do is you make your Foucault using the secondary, your becoming secondary, yeah, and you measure the astigmatism of this of your beam. So does it, when you turn it, does it create an astigmatism on the light you can back? So you measure it this way, you measure it that way on your Foucault, and then you see whether the knife edge in this way or in that way has a different length of focal length. And then there are formulas around, by the difference of the focal length of the 2 knife edge tests, one 90% to the other, you can identify how much focal length your secondary has. And then if you arrived at the perfect secondary, you would put it between 3 pieces of glass. So you put your perfect secondary, you cover it with a thin layer of pitch, glue it onto a piece of glass, put another piece of glass below, and then you put it on a 45 degrees holder, and then you would drill the 90 degrees, this oval shape out of it after you have finished it. And with this pitch layer, you would take care that the edges are fine, and you would lay the pitch layer on there, and then bevel the edges again, and then you have and then get it coated, and then you have your secondary mirror. It is so much effort, it is so difficult, it is so challenging that hardly anyone has ever made a secondary mirror, flat mirror. It would be.
How much time does it take to drill that hole and get the secondary to be oval shape?
Honestly, I have drilled glass with pitch, with normal. So I have a stand drill, yeah, and I've drilled blanks out of pieces of glass sheets, and it takes hours, I would say. It's really painful. Like, even drilling this out is absolutely painful.
Okay.
Because you would have a tool which is kind of a metal, like tin can, yeah, and you would grind. You would put some tooth in this tin can, yeah, some gaps, and then you grind into the. You would use ceram oxide, yeah, because you wouldn't have a diamond drilling thingy, yeah. You would need to have a metal drill, and then you would use ceram oxide to then grind through this whole piece of glass. That's how you would drill it out. You would grind it out with a cylinder. It's painful. I know. In German, in the forum, a handful of people have made a secondary, and the ones I know made a lowrider 24-inch or 30-inch telescope. So a telescope where the secondary isn't actually 45 degrees, but a bit smaller. So you watch from the bottom into a bit lower into the telescope, because the telescope was so large that you then only need a small ladder and not a large one. And the secondary had also like 15 centimeters diameter or so. And these secondaries are, if you can get them, are very expensive. So there was a good reason to make a secondary, and it took ages and was very, very, very painful. A normal secondary for a 10-inch, let's say 70, 80 centimeters diameter, costs 100 euros or a bit more than 70,000 rupees. A bit more. If you can get hold of someone who brings you from abroad, yeah, from the US or Germany, you would save a lot. It is not worth to make it. Simply not worth it. That's yeah. I've never made one.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nikolas. So people, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask Nikolas directly.
Hi, Nikolas. I have a question for you.
Hi.
If you want to make something like a really large telescope, something beyond an 18-inch, but you don't have any experience making telescope, what do you suggest is an aperture that someone could start with, so they could find it easy to make something beyond an 18-inch?
Okay, so I would not recommend. So for a start, conservative telescope makers say with a 6-inch you will always succeed, and that's something I would say. You will if you start with a 6-inch, it will work. Yeah, we will get a nice telescope at the end. Yeah, you don't have to go too short focal, too short f ratios and everything. I would say you can also start with a 10 or 12-inch. If you have understood how Foucault testing with a Cauda mask works, if you have if you are not shy of asking questions, yeah, or if you have issues figuring the mirror, if you share your results in Foucault testing with experienced guys, if you have a question or if you are stuck, you will probably end up with at points where you say, I don't actually know how to proceed or whether it's good. But there will always be enough people around to tell you what the best approach is to overcome the obstacle. Anything where you need to use tools that are smaller than the mirror itself, where you work with a mirror not with a mirror on top, but with a mirror on at the bottom, and use tools smaller than the mirror, I think you should have some experience in making mirrors, and that's something I would say is, say, from 14-inch and above, you don't want to use full diameter tools, because the tools simply become too heavy, and pushing them over the mirror is then too difficult. I can show you something. I can't show you something. Well, can't you? I have my phone. I've made a so there are mirror making machines out there.
I think they're called Mirroromatics, right?
Yeah, Mirroromatic is one famous design, which I use, for example, myself. But you can, there are other designs out there as well. But the Mirroromatic is a very useful tool if you want to make a lot of mirrors, or if you want to make very large mirrors. And Mirroromatic looks like this.
Yeah, I can see it. Wow, that's amazing.
Okay, so this is a round plate. Yeah, this is a round wooden plate. It has a diameter of 24-inch, I think. So you can make mirrors up to let's say 20 inch with this tool, with this machine. Yeah. So we have this. Sorry, come on. We have this piece on here that would be moved around. You can put a rod in here and then attach the tool. And with this excenter thing, you move this one around. So you can change the position of the tool depending on where you put it into this long hole. And then there's a long hole here where you can then change the eccentricity and the length of the stroke. And this one is turning and the table is turning. And then you can make large mirrors with a lot less effort, especially on polishing. Yeah, you would just need to stand by every 15 minutes whether you need to add ceram oxide, things like this. So this is very useful if you want to make large mirrors, and I think it pays off if you make a 16-inch or larger, and if you can sell it to someone who wants to make a 16-inch or larger afterwards. It's not inexpensive to build such a device. You need a strong motor, a strong engine. You need to have a lot of pulleys and discs and rods, and you need to find companies where you can get it. I mean, yeah, you go to Bangalore City Market and order it, yeah, but it's still effort to build something like this, and to use something like this is great, but it's not worth if you want to only make one mirror. If you have a club, yeah, and someone has let's say a workshop where it can be put and stored, then it's great to have it as a club, especially, yeah, because then you can say, okay, you make 14 inches or so, yeah, and there are also, regarding rough grinding, you can save a lot of time on rough grinding using angle grinder and a diamond disc, yeah. But you have to work wet all the time, as I mentioned, with glass, and then you need a angle grinder which can be used with wet grindings, and that's they are expensive. That's very special tools, yeah. If you can borrow it somewhere, if you have a company which borrows these kind of tools, then it would be worth it, because it saves you a lot of time hogging out the center of the telescope, but it is again, it saves you a lot of time, but it's you need to have special tools. If you want to make lenses, I can also show you something. Okay, this is a normal, typical table of what you use if you want to make lenses. So you have a small, very small disc, and a which is in a kind of a plastic thingy, and that rotates, and then you have a Frequenzwandler, yeah, for a frequency changer to change the speed of the engine, of the electrical engine at the bottom, which is like upright, yeah. And it turns with some 60 turns per minute. And you see here, here at the top there is even a tool, and there's these bottles of grit, yeah, the micro grit, which is white. And then here's a grinding tool, which is a lens tool, a convex tool for a lens, which I was making, which I probably will never finish. That is something which you then need for making lenses, because grinding lenses by hand without such a device, you have to make so many surfaces. It's also hardly possible.
Nikolas, what is your opinion regarding the fixed post grinding machine, where you don't have the fixed post grinding machine? So where the arms don't move, so the tool and mirror just rotate with respect to each other, but they don't move on top of each other.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, question is always in these kind of setups. You always there's always a danger of creating zones. Moving the mirror and the tool off center against each other are the best way to avoid zones creating in the mirror. So circular zones that go circular in this mirror. So if you have, I mean, you want to have a perfect shape,
right?
But you can easily create, if you don't move the arm, the accenter doesn't move a lot. You can create circular zones in the mirror that are very difficult to remove later. So I would prefer. It may work out. It may, yeah. Not much experience with it, but I would be, if there are slight density differences in the glass, so or in the tool that you use, or so, yeah, I can imagine it's prone to create zones.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, what you can do, you can put the mirror off center on the plate, yeah, and then move it around, and then off center it quite frequently to somewhere else. But I would honestly, I think for most cases a mirror machine, grinding machine, is not required. What you can think of is borrowing wet grinding angle grinder and buy a disc for hugging out the center. That should be easy. The one thing I would recommend also is, if you don't know how to get blanks, and you are I mean, we have 40 odd people on this call, yeah. If you decide to start making mirrors, you should look at buying used, scratched, yeah, glass table plates. I got one which was 2 times 1 meter and had a 90 millimeter thickness, and you can make, if you're thoroughly, you can make 12 inches out of it, 12-inch mirrors, even 14-inch mirrors out of this plate, and you can get many mirror blanks out of such a piece of glass. And it is cut out with high pressure water. And for me, cutting this whole piece of glass cost, what did it cost? Some 100,000, some 1 lakh some years ago. But I had many blanks, and I think I paid nothing for the glass in the end. Yeah? Hardly anything. So you can get dozens of blanks for relatively small money, and they're perfectly fine. It's so the normal window glass, if it's thick enough, it's perfectly good enough for a normal mirror. That is how you can get mirrors, this stuff cheap. Yeah, on other ATM material, I assume getting it, asking, so K80 grid, K180 grid, I think it's easy to get, yeah. But this microgrid and the pitch may be more difficult. And ceram oxide, good ceram oxide. And there I would assume that try to get someone from abroad, bring it over, because it's light, it's not heavy, it fits in every bag better than any telescope or similar. And in Germany, at least, there is a guy in Munich who is more or less providing the stuff to hold the whole amateur making, also ATM community since centuries, essentially, yeah, or decades at least. It's not since centuries, so since decades at least. And the quality he delivers is always perfect. Yeah, it's exactly the same stuff they use in the optical shops in the industry. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicholas. So I bought a 10-inch mirror making kit from Stanis from Germany that you had recommended. So let's see how it goes. I have also ordered some some pitch, Aculap and cerium oxide from godgrid.com. So that should also come in some time. So let's see how all those materials work. But in India also we get these things, but usually we have to buy it in bulk quantities. And what I have faced is, they are not very pure. So I have got a lot of scratches before during fine grinding. So that was one of the main problems.
Their status is really very, very thoroughly. Yeah, he also does the same. I mean, he starts packing the stuff. He always starts with the finest ones, goes over to the cursor ones, and he always wraps it twice. So 2 plastic bags. So also when you unpack the stuff from starters, yeah, start with the 3 micrometer first, yeah, and then go over to the larger ones and fill it into bottles, ideally with a cap. Yeah. So I showed you, I use for storing the microgrids, I use, then we have it here. These kind of laboratory bottles. Yeah, you can get them probably by anywhere you can get laboratory materials. There's a small pin on here and a red cap, and it has the microgrid in there with water. And if you want to use it, then you just shake it a bit, and then you can pour it on your mirror, and then you are 100% sure that in the bottle it will never be contaminated. You don't have to work with spoons or something like this. Yeah, it makes it a lot better to keep it clean. Yeah, otherwise dust is always a danger. Yeah.
Yep.
That's why wearing a cap is not a bad idea. Not having a beard is also cover face mask. Yeah, it's nowadays it's easy.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so if there are no other questions, then probably we can end the session. And so let's just check. Are there any last questions? Because we have already crossed our time limit.
Hi, yeah, Nicholas. If I have any questions, can I email them to you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh, great. Because I don't have questions.
Any questions, any remarks, anything you want to know, comments, if you want to get the design for the Daalkirchen, just mail me. Yeah, I try to answer in time and in short notice.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Nicholas, do you have any, so if people want to follow you, so do you have any social media accounts where they can follow you?
Not really. Honestly, no. Honestly, I also need to say I'm not at the moment not making a lot of ATM stuff. I have as I mentioned, I'm a crazy guy regarding ATM thingies, and I've made stuff that's completely useless. I'm currently working since like 5 years on a Apo Bino, also 8 centimeter, 3 lenses, calcium fluoride, bino, apochromatic refractor. But I haven't touched it since like a year or two now, because has its own challenges. These are really, really large. So at the moment, I'm not making a telescope. I may, at one point, start with a 14-inch Dobson, where I have the blank in the cellar already. So I just need to get it on the machine and get it started. But another thing I want to recommend you or tell you about amateur telescope making, it takes a lot of time. And if you're young, you're alone, and don't have wife and kids, use it. Use the time. In the moment you have kids around, there are things there are so many things that are more important than spending dozens of hours in making a telescope. Whatever telescope you've made until then, will stay. But you will find it difficult to get the time to make especially large complex optics from that time onwards. So I hope that I be able to make the 14-inch sometime. I may finish the apples at some point in time. Fine grinding on the calcium fluoride lenses is done, so they need to be polished, and the inner surfaces are fine for the other lenses. The outer surfaces for the lenses still need full rough grinding and everything. So yeah, that's mainly it.
Thank you, Nikolas.
Yeah. Okay. Then Katie and I will stay in contact. If we have any other, we may at some point in time do a follow-up session on testing, I think, because there are so many other aspects and details on optical testing that we couldn't cover. And what I also would like to do is a session on telescope designs. So probably not on a high. So I'm not a mathematician and telescope designer yet, but there are some principles and some good ideas and some things that I can speak about on telescope design. That we can do a session about that one as well.
That's great, Nikolas. So basically, now we are actually restarting telescope making in BAS. So I have at least 3 sets of 6-inch mirror blanks and tools, 3 sets of 12-inch blanks and tools, and 2 sets of 10-inch. So we have about 8 telescopes that we can. 8 mirrors at least that we can make right now. So as and when we get some volunteers, we can continue this work, and hopefully this session would have inspired many people to start making their own mirror as well. So thanks a lot, and definitely we will have another session with you on testing once we start making these mirrors in a few
great.
months.
That's
all
good.
right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicholas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great session.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.